So, welcome to the next part of this guide. In the last one, we already went over how to tune your fueling with the free version of Tunerstudio, because it has some cut-off features that you cannot use with the free version that are available with the paid version. And we have that now, or well, I had that on the last video as well, but other than the Autotune and some other small little things, there are not that many differences. On the paid version of Tunerstudio, you get Autotune. So basically, well, it's a bit less capable than it might sound. So Autotune is able to tune your fueling by looking at the AFR target you have set and your actual AFR value, and then it adjusts your VE table accordingly. Just the same way as we did in the last part with the Megalog viewer, but just live. So while you are driving, and you can let your laptop run Autotune, and then it will adjust automatically. Although here you gotta keep also in mind that you shouldn't be using Tunerstudio alone or Autotune alone to do this, because if you would only use that and wouldn't correct any mistakes or any imperfections that Tunerstudio or Autotune does inherently produce, then you won't get a good VE map, and so that's something you gotta watch out for. So this is why we would tune in, first of all, different stages within the Autotune feature, and then again, after every stage, we will look at our VE table, smooth stuff out if there's areas where there are spikes or low spots in your fuel table, then just see that we can get rid of those, and then do it all again in an instance where I would show you how to do that exactly. First of all, again, as in the other part, I would ask you to create a VE table that kind of matches what I told you in the videos that we did about the creation of a base map. So that you have like around about 50 or so in the idle cells, and around about maybe 60 to 70 in the part throttle cells, and about 100 or 90 to 100 depending on the RPM in your full throttle or wide open throttle cells, which I have here. I already tuned mine with the Megalog viewer method, so the one we had looking at last time, but this is going to be now the other method. So, and also obviously also you have to look at the AFR table, and that has to be configured correctly. I in mine did a bit of well, more of the efficiency and emissions testing map, so I went for 14.7. Obviously the car would run a bit better if you went for like 14 to 13.5, and I made it a bit leaner in the cruise cells, but that's not really that big of a deal. You just need a map that is correct and not some gibberish, so that the ECU knows what AFR is to look for when adjusting the VE table by itself. When you go to Tune Analyze Live, then you have on the left side you have some gauges. Personally, I recommend that you use one RPM gauge, then you use one sensor input, the AFR gauge, AFR ratio, and then I would recommend there you go, engine map gauge, so that you know at what point in the map you are. Well, obviously you know that by looking at the table as well, but you obviously also can see the engine RPM and the engine map more precisely. For example, if you want to monitor boost while you are in boost, then you can see that on the map gauge. And the airflow ratio also makes sense, so that you know if you are maybe too lean. If you have a passenger that has the laptop in the seat and you cannot watch your AFR gauge, for example, then you can look at your AFR gauge within Tunerstudio, and your passenger can tell you when to stop accelerating or whatever, so that it is, yeah, so that the drive is going correctly. Again, as in the other video, I told you, please, if you drive at first, drive slowly, and look at the idle and part throttle and let the program tune the idle and part throttle, and then see what the ECU wants, or rather what the VE table is setting or is going to be set to. So don't do a wide open throttle pull without having your VE table tuned, because that can lead to obviously damage, especially on a boosted application. When you run like too lean, that can result in a hole in the piston. So please do it slowly and go further and further with your RPM and also with your gas pedal position, so throttle position, and go step by step and not all at once. There are also some settings in here that are under advanced settings, which are cell change resistance. So this is the different stages I was talking about. There are differences in how the ECU or how Tunerstudio, how it reacts to the differences in your AFR value. If it is on, for example, easy or very easy, the changes in your VE table are going to be very, very drastic, and it will not take long to get a lot of changes within that map. For example, if you go to normal or even hard, these changes will be harder and smaller to make, while maybe Tunerstudio might change some cells like 10 or 20% even at very easy, because they were way too lean or way too rich. On normal or on hard, it will only change them by 1 or 2 depending on how long you are in that cell while you are driving. And on very hard, which would be the last step we would be doing, then you could select that on the longer cruise, and then the ECU would slowly adjust to the differences within the air-fuel ratio target and the actual air-fuel ratio. I will demonstrate that to you by selecting very easy and putting all of the values to, let's say, 50. And then you will see that when we drive in a few minutes, you will see that the ECU will quickly determine that the value of 50 in most of the upper cells is way too lean, and is going to react quickly to the actual difference in the AFRs, and the engine will go from driving terribly to driving better and better the longer we do this. So yeah, I'll put on my GoPro and we'll have a drive. So for demonstration purposes, I set the map to 50% VE at the whole map. Obviously this doesn't make sense as a starting point for you, because obviously starting at 50% VE on the whole table is kind of stupid. So as I said, I would recommend you use a map that you created as a base map, or that was provided as a base map. But this is just to show you how the table reacts to the Autotune. And again, we have some different settings here, which I wouldn't really recommend touching, or rather, maybe if you want to stop it from tuning your idle, when you have set that up, you can use min fuel load and set that to the desired kPa that is above your idle, so it does not tune idle. Let's start the engine now. And for the first part, I'm going to set it to very easy. As I said, I'm going to start here and then we'll go from there. I'm also going to turn off my EGO control, and then we start at tune, and then we'll just take a drive. But take it easy. As I said, this is just right now for very easy and showing what actually is done. We are also going to set the coolant temperature to 50, as we don't need it to be like 70 right now. And then we are off. You can already see it changes every cell pretty easily, or rather pretty fast, almost when it hits it immediately. And again, as always, watch your AFR gauge to see what the engine is doing, so that you don't lean out your car and potentially do any damage to it. So we are just going to take it easy. You can see by my KPA reading and by my RPM, I'm gonna slowly increase the RPM and not go onto full throttle, because I know full throttle is, well, I guess riskier to tune than just idle and power throttle. But if you look, or if you watch your AFR gauge, if you have it in your field of vision and look at it and see that it doesn't go like above lambda 1 when cruising, or above lambda 1.2, I'd say that's kind of a critical point, then you're going to be fine probably, and you can tune in those areas. If you can see it go leaner, obviously I would abort the pull and adjust manually so that it is a bit richer in these areas. Like you can see here, I'm running at lambda 1.1 right now, so, or at AFR like 16, and it is getting really lean, and Autotune is automatically making the tune richer in those areas. So where I was right now, so as you were able to see in Tunerstudio, it automatically made it richer here. So we just took a short drive, only a few minutes, and because of that I'm going to pull over now and look at what Autotune did. And already I can now go ahead and adjust manually. So we will first of all save everything on the ECU, and I can already see a tendency where the fueling wants to go. So I'm gonna say, well, we already have like 67 here, and going from there above, I'm going to just put in about 10% additionally here. 1 to 10, so that we're at 60, and then maybe plus 10 again here. And also stop, and then save on ECU, and then we already have a rough guidance on how to continue. Obviously you will have to do this a few times to get your map to a point where you are ready to go from very easy to easy, and then obviously to normal, hard and very hard. I'm just gonna take another drive, short drive on very easy, and maybe ramp up the RPM and load this time, at least for a bit. For example, I could also do a full throttle pull, so wide open throttle. You can see that is way too lean, and yeah. So we already know that on wide open throttle we need to adjust it quite a bit richer to get it where we want to, which we are going to do when I arrive in the next spot where I can pull over. So I'm gonna do the same thing again. As we know, or we saw, well, it wants it a lot richer on the, let's just say to plus 20, and then we'll stop and start again. We can also see on the status where the ECU touched the cells most. So the more it goes into the red on the top part, the more often the cells were touched. And the other ones are the changes, so where it actually changed the tune. And you can also see that while I drive, it's already changing the cells. And we see we are a lot better, or a lot closer to our target AFR and the top cells. So we did a short few pulls, and yeah, so you can see that Tunerstudio changed quite a lot, and we say pause tune or stop auto tune and then save on ECU, and then we'll shut off the car for now because we are going to look at the table at what Tunerstudio actually did. And if we look at the 3D map, we have quite a huge, well, mountainous range, and there you can see a lot of dips and stuff in the tune itself, and that's something we don't want to have, because that makes the car drive pretty bad. So if we have a lot of changes in between like a few cells. The issue we have here with our ITB setup is that on different load stages or different loads in different cells, we have on different loads we still have the same cell, so it is basically tuning a cell based on different loads. So this might be kind of difficult to tune, or as an example, but you can still see what I mean by that, because it made it quite lean here, even lower than the 50. But when I'm in here and I'm at a different load, so maybe I'm going uphill and I reach those cells, for example, the engine is going to have quite a lean spot, and this is why we need to use a EGO correction for ITBs as well. But I just want to show you what I'm going to do now. So as you can see here, we have a lot of variances in between or from one cell to another, and we're just going to smooth everything out so that it is a lot smoother than before and not as jagged as it was when we stopped tuning. So we do that here. I'll also do that here and here. So, and we're going to look at the, or maybe just 108. So that our table looks quite a bit more smooth than it did before. Obviously we have quite a big variance here, so I'm gonna smooth that out here as well, and here as well. There you go, that looks quite a bit better. Still have kind of a peak here, so that 91, don't know where that came from, but we'll just do that. And then we click on burn. There you go. So we already have now a table that's a bit more smoother. The issue is now, though, we need to do that at every stage where we tune. So I'm going to set this to normal now. I'm going to skip the easy step. You can also do that if you want to do a bit more. But I'm going to do to set that at normal, and I'm starting auto tune, and I'm doing a longer drive than I was just now, because on normal it takes a bit more time for the ECU to adapt to the correct, or to adapt to the fueling, or to correct everything. tuning at a higher RPM so that we also touch those cells. So we did the same thing on normal now, and we are basically again smoothing everything out. Because we did a longer tune or a longer drive, I know I've seen that we need more fuel up here, so I'm going to put 125 in here and smooth that to here and smooth that to here. There, and also do some here. Let's see how the table looks. Oh, looks okay. I think this might be kind of a high spot that isn't really necessary. We'll see if it is or if it was when we do the next run, and we'll smooth something. So, and we are going to do the same thing again. Again, you'll have to do this multiple times, probably 5 times to 7 times, I'd say, is probably the minimum. Because obviously there is a lot of cells that you have to touch, and yeah. Okay, so looking at the final numbers, you can see what Autotune is actually doing. So it is tuning everything as you are going. I'm going to lower this right here because we seem to be there better. The only issue I see with Autotune is that obviously it creates a quite a lot of dips and quite a lot of holes in your table. So I wouldn't really recommend this as a be-all and end-all table for, or be-all and end-all method for tuning. And so I would always go ahead and touch the table manually so that it is really smooth, or smoother than with Autotune itself, because it just cannot provide you with the same smoothness that it would have to have in order for it to work correctly. although it is a good tool to tune your car as for fueling when you, for example, do not have a tuner or are just not able to look at all the things that you would have when you are driving. Something to look out for is as well the idle. So the idle cells that you are idling at, those are kind of tricky because Autotune tends to touch them again, even though they were pretty good at one point. The issue is that most of the cars are hovering between, most of the cars kind of vary depending on outside conditions on the idle VE table, and this is why I like to set them at a fixed value and then use the EGO control, which we are going to look at in a later video, to finalize or to get to the final value I actually want to. So I hope you get a pretty good idea from this. I'm going to do a pass on very hard now too, because just so that you see that as well. And I'm just going to do a cruise, because on very hard it takes quite a lot of being in one cell while driving to get that cell to change, and this is what I want to demonstrate to you now as well. So you are going to see less change within the table, and this is, for example, if you do a longer drive, maybe take your laptop out with you and then see that the tables, or see that your ECU changes. Some things that it may think over a long period of time are still too lean maybe, or yeah, need some adjustment. And that's a good thing to do that in the long term, and then the ECU will also be a lot more precise than in the easy or very easy mode. And so that's something that you gotta keep in mind, that really might benefit you over time. And I'm just gonna take the same route I did now, and we'll see if and how much the ECU is going to change stuff, if at all, because we are now in various states of as you can see in the top field, the more you are in one cell, the greener it gets, and the more the ECU is confident. It's basically how confident the ECU is in how correct that one cell is. So you can vary that with, for example, this would be the same thing as doing load tuning or fixed load tuning on a dyno. So you fix the dyno at one load, and then you can tune one cell individually. And you can see the ECU only took away a few cells here. We only reduced it or made the ECU lead. The ECU only made the tune leaner in like 2 cells. And this is because the ECU only thought in those 2 cells it makes sense to make the tune actually leaner. Or maybe the ECU. But as you can see, setting the ECU to very hard is maybe only something for long drives, like where you drive on half an hour or whatever. So it really changes slowly, and it is really like a long-term fuel trim that you would look at if you had a stock ECU, and then that ECU does a long-term fuel trim if it thinks something is maybe too lean or too rich, and if it sees that a lot of periods of time, then it will trim that or that area in the table, even on a stock ECU that is relatively modern, over a longer period of time. I'm going to also show you now just a short clip on hard, because that is also kind of something that I think sees more use, because hard is for medium-sized trips, or it does change cells a bit more drastic than on very hard, but is not as flexible as medium, because normal or medium is kind of still pretty, well, changes still a lot, and you don't always want that. And I prefer hard. So I'm not exactly sure what happened here. I think I just turned off my GoPro because the battery was empty. But this is the opportunity so that I can now show you on, or tell you what happens, and while I am in my office and you are still looking at Tunerstudio, which is pretty practical. So again, we are here at the hard setting for the tuning or the cell changes. So the ECU is able to change the cells more quickly than on very hard, but as I said, not as easily as on normal, for example. And this is what we can see here. We are driving part throttle on a highway, and now full throttle, and the ECU changes the cells only very slowly. So this is kind of more, it gives you more precision within these changes, and the ECU is more confident in the changes that it is actually correct. This is especially important because on some cells, or in some cells, the load, as I said, can vary, and so the ECU can kind of average it out and find the actual correct value. So it is important that you also take these steps into consideration to use hard and very hard also. For example, you might be using, if you have the ability to, and you are, for example, using a track car at a track day, just put your laptop in somewhere where it doesn't fly around and use the very hard setting to just let the ECU adjust the few last steps to get a perfect VE table. And that's kind of the beauty of the Autotune, that it is kind of usable as a long-term fuel trim, as I said. And this, you can't really get that with the free version of Tunerstudio, and this is why this works better in conjunction with touching the map yourself than with the Megalog viewer taking logs and then changing accordingly. So this can really be a tool that is really good if used correctly. At the end of it all, again, in my opinion, it really makes sense to buy the full version of Tunerstudio to use Autotune and therefore get a easier tuning experience. Although you have to obviously touch the map yourself, it is still much better than with Megalog viewer, taking logs, tuning it, and then taking a log again, and so on and so forth. So Again, if you like this video, leave it a like or subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. I know it was a bit long now, but it was a lot to explain for me, so maybe keep that in mind. Again, if you want to know more about this, or if you need any help with your project, your tune or whatever, or need tuning services done, just hit me up on Instagram, as I can help you with that there. Otherwise, I wish you a nice day, and yeah, goodbye.